we take a trip down memory lane and meet David's parents, Gabrielle Haller and Charles Xavier. But in trying to change his past, does David, in fact, help create it? Always consequences to time travel. On this week's Legion, Chapter 22. Hey everyone, D here, and welcome to this week's review of Legion. So yes, of course, lots of spoilers ahead. And as usual, do want to let you know about our quick jump index system. Just take a look down in the description below. We'll have this entire review broken down and time-coded, much like Switch. You can jump forward, jump back, watch this review in any order you would like. And yes, of course, I do want to bring up the fact, I know I'm wearing a Batman t-shirt, and this is a Marvel show, but hey, it's all comics, it's all awesomeness. We can all get along, right? Also, it was just recently the 30th anniversary of the 1989 Michael Keaton Batman film, so still kind of celebrating. I got to see that on premiere night. It was awesome. Anyway, let's jump into this review. And I know we've been waiting a long time to get some of this information, to go back and actually meet David's father. And, it was a fun ride. It was actually a very direct story. Not a whole lot of mind-travel-y creepiness. Not a little bit, of course. It is Legion. But really, overall, just a very straightforward story of how Charles and Gabrielle met in a mental hospital, both kind of recovering from post-World War II stressors. And yeah, that would probably send someone into the hospital. For Charles, it appears that he was in combat, and maybe that's when his powers first started popping out, or he first used them, had a soldier that was attacking him kill himself. So yeah, that might want to send somebody who has a little bit of a moral code to retreat, to try and either stay away from the world, or perhaps, as he seems to, use his powers to attempt to help. And the person that sort of latches on with him is Gabrielle Haller, who is from the camps. In the comics, Gabrielle is a Holocaust survivor. She's traumatic. She same thing, comatose. And Charles goes in, uses his powers to help bring her out. And it's very much sort of played out the same way here. Outside of saying that she was from the camps, not really too much more, but of course, very traumatic circumstances to be in. When he did jump in her mind, there was a lot of combat noise, so I was wondering if it was more of, we know it was more as PTSD now. At the time, shell shock was how it was referred. So, could be a couple of those things. Her line later on, I have seen blood on fire, certainly implies some very traumatic experiences for her. But really what we see here is how similar Gabrielle and Charles's relationship is to Sid and David's. We have constant just similarities there, how they interact. The first date's cherry pie, which was awesome. The music that was used there, the energy the two of these people play off of, the sort of instant attraction. When Charles walks in, he looks over and he sees Gabrielle. In fact, she's seemed to have popped out of it for a moment, actually staring at him. And then he goes over and she's comatose, and it takes that whole little dance maneuver in order to bring her out. So that's really kind of the nice positive thing here is, again, this repetition of history. And as we find through all of this, this isn't just flashback stories. This is David looking back with Switch, using that combination of powers to try and observe his past. This is him seeing all of this happen. Must be a nice little feeling for David to sort of see all the similarities, how similar his and Sid's relationship are to his parents, and in many ways how David is sort of the perfect pairing of his parents. The psychic father, very powerful telepath, telekinetic, telepath there, not telekinetic, Charles is not. And his mom, well concerned about her mental state. That was one thing that sort of came up, especially in the earlier scenes, is her concerns. Is it going to be like Dad, or is he going to be like me? For her very much seeing that concern. And in fact, we had a nice little scene there too, with both of them concerned that David will be like them. Charles concerned that he would have this power that he can't control or doesn't understand, much like he does until he was able to accept it and came up with rules. I did appreciate that. And then Gabriel, who definitely seems to be more inclined for tentative mental states, shall we say. Concerned that maybe some of her madness, her concerns, her proclivities would manifest in David. And of course, as we find out, much like relationships repeating through time, he is the perfect combination of those two, also repeating forward. The one child that has both of their sort of mental pluses and minuses. Now, of course, like I said, we find that this is all what we're seeing is David's perception of the past as he is trying to look back and warn his parents and protect himself. Basically, he's back there to try and keep Farouk from jumping into his body, change his whole past. Fortunately, there are complications to time travel. If we think back of the last episode where Switch was listening to the instructions in her head, I believe it was chapter 20 for time travel, consequences to time travel. Always have to look out of it. Keep in mind exactly what you want to do. Stay focused. Unfortunately, David, it's the first time that he's tried this time travel. All the way back there. We hear that even in Switch later on. It's, I've never tried to go back this far. So, yeah, not easy, not as smooth, maybe jumping around between related situations. But this attempt to watch what's going on seems to have actually influenced the outcome. In fact, like that self-fulfilling prophecy, and going back to change history, you realize that your attempts to change it actually made history unravel the way that it did. And here we basically see is that he contributes to his own mother's madness in going back and trying to see these moments of his parents. David seems to have haunted his own house. The music, the 60s, 70s music, which is all very cool. Won't you come in everywhere? Repeating over and over in the background in Charles's mind, mostly in his mom's. It might have been Charles's natural, mental powers to be able to help push this away or sort through it. But it seems to have contributed to his mom's degrading mental state. So that as he is trying to warn her, he actually makes her less likely to react. Until we already get to the point where he appears to try and warn and communicate, and she faints and just goes right back into his comatose state just as Dad arrives, and that in fact opens the door and allows Farouk to come in and take over the body. So it's really interesting seeing how all of these elements laid out, that David, in attempting to change his past, helped create it. And of course, what makes Gabrielle more susceptible to that declining mental state is the fact that her husband isn't around. Why? Because Charles is out to find Amal Farouk, a man just like him. So we didn't have to be alone in the world anymore, which not necessarily a great thing to say to your wife, because that's what she's there for. She is there to be with you, so you are not alone, you are together. But of course, no, he is talking about somebody like him with the same mental powers. We're seeing that, obviously, mutanthood, superpowers, things like that, very unknown at this time. And we do get to see, of course, that sort of discovery of Amal in a great, beautiful scene with an early Cerebro. And I just love that bit, how he's down, Charles is down in his basement, putting up, it's not a strainer with tubes, though it looks kind of like that. And focusing in, listening to all the voices around. And again, just a beautiful, great scene of centering in down on Amal on the table where he's having dinner, and then suddenly it's like Amal recognizes and awakens and stares back at him. and we get that first glimpse of the devil with yellow eyes. But just again, super cool, great, beautiful setup on this. And of course, it sort of makes sense that while he is out finding, hunting down Farouk, at some point, that must have been the battle while he was gone, and that was allowed, again, his wife alone with young David, which allowed that sort of astral mental projection of Farouk to come down and sort of haunt the house. And again, it's sort of an interesting bit of idea here. Throughout a lot of these memories, we are seeing that stupid, creepy doll of the world's angriest boy in the world. Much like from the old storybook back in first season, it's popped up in last. Here, it's now in doll mode. And whenever we have seen this is always the influence of Farouk in David's memories. We only see this when David is looking back at his own memories, and this is one of the devices that Farouk in his subconscious used to distract and to haunt and to misdirect. In some ways, it was just significant of his presence and influence. But we're seeing these in flashback. We're seeing these in these, again, not supposedly memories, but of perceptions of the past, as David has mentally projected himself with Switch and used that combination of powers, because he's never really physically present. He sort of makes his presence feel sort of at the very end there, but mostly it's a psychic sort of observation of the past, and through doing that, he is influencing the subjects around with the music and the haunting melodies and the eventual stuff that helps drive his mom mad. But I'm wondering if Farouk now is piggybacking on David projection into the past. I mean, there's this one scene where we're looking at Charles when he's in the hospital. They did the whole kind of like romance scene and the love, and we get the first big sort of kiss up on the balcony with Charles and Gabrielle. There's another scene right after that where Charles sort of wakes up. And he goes into sort of a dream state, and this is before he goes over and they do the whole sort of bed scene. But we see Farouk observing here, much like we saw the David sort of projection with the music and stuff. But here it's Farouk from multiple personalities, which overlays into David of now. And I'm always wondering how much of David has actually, or how much of Farouk has left David. I think I mentioned last week the possibility that that Lenny is still kind of under Farouk's influence. And I'm wondering if they're sort of like using that as a Wi-Fi tower for Farouk to come in. Because, like I said, the only time we ever saw the world's angriest boy or the demon with yellow eyes was in David's memories, a mental projection back in perception of the past. And that was used to alter those memories. Is the same thing happening now? Is Farouk altering David's perception of the past? Or is this Farouk maybe influencing his mom more? There seemed to be a little bit of a connection because she had the doll. She was always carrying the doll. Charles found it in a box that Gabrielle was holding in the hospital. And of course, Gabrielle gave it to young David in the crib. To me, there's a couple of different possibilities. One, is Farouk somehow responsible to what happened to Gabrielle and her trauma from back in the Holocaust? Less likely, but it's possible. For me, because we do see these occasional insights of Farouk the same way that we see David sort of flash forwards with the music and the cult and all of that, that he is altering David's perception of the past, maybe pushing him for his intense emotional reaction, opening the door so that he himself in the past could go into David. It's very messy, but that's what time travel is. But David definitely seems to have contributed to his own past by trying to alter it. What I'm wondering is how much is Farouk still using David now to ensure his own past? and survival coming forward? Or has Farouk always been involved in this family, in this group, either through his mother or just the interactions with his father and then with David, that this really is, there's a much bigger connection here than thought before? So, of course, eventually we find that Charles's trip down to Morocco does not go exactly the way that he wanted. Finally reaching out to his wife to let him know he should never have come. Amal Farouk is a monster. And I'm assuming, of course, at this point, he has done his big battle with Farouk. Because we have seen the sort of smoke creature element influence floating around the house as Gabrielle has been alone, slowly sort of losing her mind, both possibly from David's influence trying to contact her, and then of course Farouk's consciousness trying to find a new host to live inside of, to attach itself to. And that sort of gets us to our Scene of the Week for this week. And this is, of course, Gabrielle's sort of mental collapse. They've got a lot of great dream sequences in this, both when we saw sort of Charles's adventure, seeing his past, one of the opening bits where we've got Gabrielle walking out of the house, and we just see those floating double doors in the walkway. Very simple, but really cool looking. And here, of course, we have Gabrielle just collapsing inside of her own mental state, trapped inside of a room. The doors aren't there anymore. The windows aren't there anymore. That definite sort of collapse. And I'm not entirely sure at this point how much is just her own internal mental degradation from the unexplainable incidents around here, or how much is also possibly Farouk pushing at those soft edges, those vulnerable areas, to sort of overload, to distract her, to open the door in order to take over David's body. Because when she does finally go out and see that David down in the crib and tries to turn him over, that was it right there. That's been haunting me since I just saw it. It's a simple scene, but I mean, we already have gotten this big emotional pull-up. We're freaked out, the whole haunted imagery, and as she reaches into the crib and it's the baby down, she turns over and it's still the back of the head, and turns it over and it's still the back of the head, and turns it over, it was just, it's apparent. It adds an extra element to it, I have to tell you, but even just from a pure visual standpoint, super creepy. And also we see sort of a difference here again, when we're seeing that haunted image, he's got the doll. And then when she screams and wakes up, no doll in the crib. No creepiest boy in the world doll. So that's what I'm thinking. That presence is an indicator of Farouk's influence, either from the past or from the future coming down. And then, of course, David appears to try and reach out to his mom. No, look out! She sees him. Mental snap, collapses. Charles walks in, banishes David from their own influence, and that whole probably mental release out, plus so concerned over his wife who is non-responsive, totally opens the door up for that beautiful smoke shot coming up, and then Farouk dropping down his influence and infecting David. And we get that final shot coming down of just the baby on Farouk's. My boy, like he's just been waiting for this. Which again makes me wonder so much from the past and the future. There should be a relatively new meeting between Farouk and David for Farouk in the past. But how much is influenced from the Farouk from the present wanting that? Again, this shows a great mental just tweak there. But ultimately a beautiful shot and really seeing the consequences of David's attempt to alter his own past. Made it happen. And then finally, of course, we get that shot of David being expunged from the past back into the hallway with Switch, pretty much locked out of doing anything. Switch is definitely losing teeth when she's time traveling. Whether it's here, she says, she went too far. She has to sleep. She overloaded herself. Is it just her body degrading? Is that just the cost of time travel? Either way, really creepy. I hate seeing organ body parts coming out. But here also we see David's reaction. Again, that mental, no, I was right there, it didn't happen, and that power-up of his. We saw it briefly before when Farouk was first trying to come up for young little baby David, and the power had gone out, and Gabrielle went up to the TV, and she saw sort of the reflection. What was it? That Switch said, use your powers. David saying, come on, turn around. Switch says, use your powers. And then David sort of glows from his own little body as a way to sort of grab attention or maybe try to push Farouk's influence away at that time. So here, now that they're in the time hallway, Switch passes out. She's overexhausted, gone too far back for too long, losing teeth. And David freaks out. Influences power inside the hallway. And where does that take us? To me, that's sort of the big question. Does he absorb Switch? Does he get lost inside the time? Does he blow up time corridors? Does he release time demon? I mean, what does he do? Because David expressing that level of anger and frustration in the space-time continuum like that, I'm guessing that's where things are about to go really, really wrong. All right, just a couple of small things. One, rules. You got powers, you gotta have rules. And something I really appreciated seeing this sort of established from Charles early on. And it really shows sort of the difference here between Charles's approach towards his powers and Farouk's, and why the two of them may not get along. Basically, Charles saying is he understands he has these powers, but there has to be lines. He can't poke around. He is just there to help. I mean, again, rudimentary, sort of a simple guideline there. Maybe needs to be refined a little bit. But simply the idea that he understands the extent of his powers and that crossing certain lines should not be permitted, to rein himself in by establishing rules of using his powers, I think really is what eventually sort of puts him at odds. While he was happy that he could find someone like himself that had his types of powers, seeing that not everybody is going to agree with those types of rules and limitations, certainly not someone who views himself as a god, as Farouk does. Again, very clearly starts to define good and evil, shall we say. And of course, by all of that, what I mean is if there's any point of those scenes that David should pay attention to, maybe it's the dad with the rules, and there's certain things you shouldn't do. If David maybe established his own ground rules, things he wouldn't do, maybe that would help sort of steer him away from his villainy trajectory. We see very on differences between Gabrielle and Charles, while they have many similarities and really appreciate each other's company. I think Gabrielle establishes sort of early on that David's father is kind of good and pure and looking for the best, while she sees that the world is just an ugly place. And I really appreciated the conversation between her and Charles, sort of when they're establishing their relationship, is he believes that people can change. She's talked about all the stuff that she sees and the horrors and stuff, and he's like, you can change. And she's like, no, people can't change. But when it comes down to it, I'd like you to prove me wrong. Again, it reminds me so much of that dynamic between Sid and David, that different points of view, some more hopeful, some a little more pessimistic, some more realistic, and yet ultimately still wanting to find the best that is possible there. So, think and hope for the best. It's just, it's a very cute scene. I loved seeing those dynamics there. Also want to remark, excellent job by Harry Lloyd and Stephanie Corneliuson, who played Charles Xavier and Gabrielle Haller in the show David's Parents. Of course, Harry Lloyd you probably recognize as Viserys from Game of Thrones. Dany's dickish brother that got crown of gold poured over his head by Khal Drogo that back in the first season. But he kind of deserved that. Anyway, like I said, I think there was excellent casting. I think David and Harry, David and Charles had a sort of similar look. We could see almost a family line there. And oddly, thought that Gabrielle looked a lot more like Lenny. You know, again, acting, performance-wise, personality-wise, much more like Sid. Looks-wise, a little bit more like Lenny. So again, just sort of an interesting comparison right there. But excellent job by both of them. All right, well, I think that pretty much covers everything, all the high points at least. Like I said, it was a very straightforward episode, probably one of the more straightforward episodes that we've had of Legion in regards to its storytelling and getting us from A to B. So now David has seen or influenced his own creation, and now with that knowledge, with that frustration, maybe not the ability to go back and try again, how is David going to react? If that last scene in Glow and stuff is any indication, it is not going to be a good reaction. I'm still pulling for you, David. I want you to be the hero, but things are not looking good. So anyway, like I said, I think that will wrap us up for this week. Now, just a brief little reminder. I am going on vacation in, just under 2 weeks, 10 days from now. So let's see, we are on chapter 22, 23 is next week, which I'll hit, but the following week, chapter 24, I will be out of town, so that review will be delayed, 24 to 48 hours, possibly longer. I'm still trying to figure out how I'm going to upload all of this with internet connections and things like that, so I will notify you guys as I know more, but just to let you know, that week's between the 19th and the 26th, those reviews will be delayed. But that's what happens. Anyway, it'll be fun. I'm going to wrap things up for now. Thank you so much for joining me with this review, and always, if you enjoyed it, please go ahead and hit that like button. Thoughts, ideas, and comments? Throw those down in the section below. You can always catch me on Twitter and Instagram. I am at Darren Jakes. Please subscribe. Quick and easy one button press. Catch all these reviews. Don't miss anything. And we'll throw up a couple of our latest reviews for you to check out right there. So, that's going to be it for me. I'm D, and I'm out of here. Catch you guys next time. Bye-bye.